Hi guys, hope everything is going well for you. So the last couple days what we've been talking about is law of sines. In order to use law of sines, you have to have a pair, an angle and side length that have the same letter. And just to recall, let's go back up here to our notes and let's look at law of sines. So law of sines is right here, and you can use law of sines by any non-right triangle. And law of sines is sine of angle A over A equals sine of angle B over B equals sine of angle C over C. But again, right here it says you need to have a pair, one angle and one side with the same letter in order to use law of sines. Well, what happens when you don't have that? What if you have all three different letters? What happens then? Well, that's what today's lesson is going to be over. We're going to spend 2 days on law of cosines. So, law of cosines. It's how you can find an angle measurement when you can't use law of sines. So you always use law of sines first, and then if you can't use law of sines, then you use law of cosines. Still a little kind of confusing, like how do I use law of cosines? Well, law of cosines, what I always think of is when you're given all three letters. So right here, this is kind of like how I remember it. You use law of cosines when given two angles and the included side of an angle, all three letters, or all three sides. So today what we're going to focus on is just this part right here. When you're given two sides and the angle include them. Then tomorrow what we're going to focus on is this right here. How do I use law of cosines when I'm given all three sides? Okay. Again, the best way to know it is when I'm using law of cosines if I have all three letters. If I have an A, a B, and a C. Doesn't matter sides or angles, then I use law of cosines. What's unique about law of cosines is you only ever use law of cosines once. Okay? You only ever use law of cosines once, then you have a pair and you go straight to law of sines. So again, let's make a little note there. So use cosines one time, then sines, law of sines, okay? So again, you only use law of cosines once to get that angle and side measurement pair. Then you go back to using law of sines. If you don't do that, then you can get into this ambiguous case where the second triangle kind of exists. And for the most part of the problems we give you, that's not true. But you can kind of get into this black hole. We don't want you to get in that. So again, law of cosines is only used once. Then you go back to law of sines. So what is law of cosines? Well, it's a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2b times c times cosine of a. You'll notice here's the three different equations, but they're really the same thing. It's always the side length that it equals is always the angle measurement, okay? And then it's always the other two sides squared minus 2 times those two sides. So even though it looks like three different equations, if you just remember the pattern, it'll be fine. It's kind of like when we talked about sum and difference of cubes, and we remembered soap, how we multiply things when it comes to soap. Instead of memorizing both those equations, sum and difference of cubes, we just memorize it as one and remember the soap. Same thing here, just see the pattern, and then go from there, okay? So let's do number 1 right down here, okay? So first thing I want to do, it says find the measurement of AB. Well, I'm going to label my sides, okay? So if this is angle A, this is side A. This is angle C, side C. Angle B, side B. So I want to look and see what I have. So I have A equals 29. I don't know angle A, okay? I have B equals 13. I don't know angle B. And I don't know C, but angle C equals 41. So again, I need to have a pair to use law of sines. That's always my first go-to. But if I look at this here, I have an A, a B, and a C. So I have to use law of cosines when I'm given all three letters, A, B, C, or whatever the triangle itself's made. So I'm going to find side C, okay? That's the only thing I can do looking at these equations up here, because I know A and B, So right here, A and B. I know C, so that's the only equation I can use. I have to find side C first, which makes sense because then I'll have a pair, angle C and side C, that I can go on to law of sines to solve. So let's do this. So I'm going to use find C. So I'm going to get C squared equals 29 squared plus 13 squared minus 2 times 29 times 13 cosine of 41. So there's a lot going on here, and the biggest error that I'm going to see when people do this is they're going to mess up order of operations. Okay, so order of operations, I do my exponents first. So I'm going to do 29 squared, and I'm going to add 13 squared, and I get 1010. So I get C squared equals 1010 minus, and then I'm going to multiply 2 times 29 times 13. So 2 times 29 times 13 gives me 754. Okay, so here's where I'll see the first issue, is that people are going to try to subtract those two numbers first before they multiply over here. Okay, order of operations, I always multiply before I add and subtract, so I need to multiply those together first and then subtract them from 1010. So again, a lot of order operations issues is the biggest issue with cosine. So just make sure that you don't have them. So I'm going to do 754 times cosine of 41. Again, make sure you're in degrees, not radians. And I end up with 569.051. You want to put as many decimal points kind of as possible. I always do 3 or 4 because then that number is more exact. If you just do 1 and round it, I'll be fine with your answer, but just try to get as exact as possible. Then I'm going to subtract those two before I square root both sides. So when I subtract those two, I end up with C squared equals 440.949. Square root both sides. And now we are finding side measurement here. So at the very end, when we find side measurement, we always round side measurement to the nearest tenth. Well, this gives me C's approximately 20.998. So we're actually going to round that to 21. Okay, because that 9 would tell that 9 to move up. So I know my side C now. So I'm going to go over here, and my C is going to be 21. Okay. So let's say they're like, okay, solve the rest of the triangle. I know the directions don't say that, but let's do that. So let's solve for the rest of the triangle. Well, now I know that C, I have my pair. So that's my go-to pair I'm going to do. And then I'm going to find my remaining angles. We always ask for you to find the largest side angle first remaining. Again, that ambiguous case thing we don't want to get involved in. So when I do that, I end up with sine of 41 over 21 equals sine of A over 29. So this is just like the lesson that was yesterday when we were solving for an angle measurement instead of just a side measurement. Because these are proportional, I'm going to cross multiply. And when I do that, I get one line of math just across from each other. Okay? I'm going to then divide by 21. I'm going to flip this so it makes a little more sense. So sine A equals 29 times sine of 41 over 21. And then just like in right triangle trig, to get rid of sine, I'm going to multiply everybody by the inverse function. I have to do to both sides in order to do it mathematically correct. So I get A equals the sine inverse of 29 times sine 41 over 21. Again, the biggest error I make here is going to be how I type it in the calculator, okay? So I want to make sure I type it in correctly. So what I like to do is I like to do my numerator first. So 29 times sine 41. Again, make sure you're in degrees. Enter. And then I divide that by 21. Enter. And then I take the sine inverse of that entire decimal. And I end up with 64.95. But we always round angle measurements to the nearest whole. So that would be 65 degrees. So I go over here to my little triangle, and I know that my A65 is A. So how do I find B now? Well, we know a triangle equals 180. So I'm going to do 180 minus 41 minus 65, and I end up with 74. So I have used law of cosines because I was given A, B, and C to start. One time to find side C. Then I had my C pair. Then I went into law of sines. So again, cosine is just a one-time deal. Today we're only doing it when you're given two sides and an angle of all three different letters. Tomorrow we'll do it. What do you do when you're given angle or side A, side B, and side C? How do you find that angle measurement? The math there's a little bit trickier because of order of operations, and that's like number 4 on your worksheet. Have a great day. If you have any questions, make sure you log on to Zoom. I look forward to seeing you guys later. Have a great day.